Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
For artists that want to follow a realistic style, I don't know that you necessarily have to overthink about an influence like me or any other painter who does realism. You can certainly get a lot from the pieces that we've done, maybe even imitate some of those compositions, but I think you'll find your own way once you're just studying reality, which is what I would do. I mean, if I'm going to look at people, things, photographs, it's beneficial to start shooting your own if you can get into that. And these days, since everybody's got a camera, that's not so much of an issue anymore. Being able to study life as the basis for something is the best. I had the longest problem of thinking I needed to have everybody and every element be perfect before I could use it as a reference source. And so it took me a long time to realize how flexible the basis of the human form is. I've posed for myself on loads of paintings where now I guess I'm called out by some people online. It's a process of getting your mind comfortable with what you're building off of. And at a certain point, I would say accept that you're going to feel like you're not seeing it until you've seen it. You know, that maybe you do need to have a thing look like a thing exactly before you're painting from it.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's time again for Word Balloon Live, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Sean McCardle is joining me. Welcome.
Hey, John. Hey, John. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. Well, like I told you, when you told me about your book from Source Point Press, you really did have me at hello. And I'm going to show a couple images from The Fuhrer and the Tramp. And it's a great idea. And it's based, well, at least the broad strokes are certainly based on the fact that back in 1940, after Captain America, well, no, Cap punched Hitler April of 41.
Yeah, so same year.
Actually, well, okay, because really, the Great Dictator, the Chaplin film, came out in late 1940.
Mm-hmm.
So it did predate. So before Cap punched Hitler in the face, Charlie Chaplin metaphorically did with The Great Dictator, an incredible movie, an atypical movie compared to Chaplin's earlier silent work. It was his first full talkie. And it just, I mean, really, this was before America was in World War II. Mm-hmm. And Chaplin really put his nuts on the table. And I'm like, no, this guy is evil. And everyone needs to know it. And in fact, people should go on YouTube. If you don't even want to watch the movie, watch Chaplin at the end of the film breaks character and gives this very passionate, important speech as himself. And it's really like, this guy is evil. This man needs to be stopped. We all have to unite against this guy. It is one of the great patriotic speeches. And in bitter irony, Chaplin was labeled a communist in the post-World War II years, to the point where he left America and was kind of exiled for several decades. It wasn't until I think he was given that a special Oscar in 1970 that he finally came back to America. It's an amazing story, and this is a fun action foreign intrigue romp, dare I say it, but really about the good guys against the Nazis. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I really think it's a lot of fun in the best ways. And really underlines the broad strokes of, like you call it, the Fuhrer versus the Tramp. That Germany was a big market, as you know, for movies. So Chaplin really was taking a financial hit and saying, yeah, fuck these guys. I don't care how much money it is. These are bad guys. And someone has to say something.
Yeah, like you said, the United States wasn't even in the war yet. This is pre-Pearl Harbor by a year. And, you know, the United States had pretty much a isolationist opinion of World War II at that point.
That's right.
While he's making the movie is whenever Hitler invaded France. So that's really when the war starts picking up, is while he's making it. So he's even ahead of the war happening in Europe. And like you said, this is the first time that he made a movie that was a talkie. Well, I mean, like
because Modern Times has a talkie.
Yeah.
But really, yeah.
So this is the first time he's not the tramp. So he abandoned the tramp character. He never plays a tramp again. And he takes on Hitler and, you know, mocks Hitler in this movie. And like you said, it's a fantastic movie. It's the whole that speech that you talked about is the whole reason I made this book.
That's great.
It's phenomenal because, okay, at this time, it's really hard to get into this mind space. At that time in 1940, Chaplin is the biggest person on the planet. There's no correlation to anybody else. Nobody else was as big as Chaplin because the tramp, he went through all nationalities, all boundaries. He was it was universal. The entire story of the tramp, the small guy, you know, thumbing his nose at authority. That's a tale that translates into any other country. Plus, also as silent movies, really easy to swap out title cards, you know. And Chaplin didn't rely on title cards either. Like him and Buster Keaton kind of went back and forth at who could use the least amount of title cards.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. Until
that the action will tell the story and be as minimalist as possible. Absolutely, man.
So that just helped him just to be a worldwide star. You know, movies at this point are 40 years old. You know, he had been making movies since 1914, 1915.
That's right.
So he was there at the inception of Hollywood and of everything taking off. And so he was recognized the world over. And for him at that moment to realize the power that he had at that moment and to be able to stop, you have the entire movie and it's a blast. It's fun. It's funny. There's a lot of, you know, his visual humor is in there with the balloon and the little ammunition, with the warhead that's chasing him around and all kinds of other stuff. But then it's like he does the entire movie and it's almost like he looks at the audience and he tells, okay, I gave you the movie. Now listen to me. And he talks as Chaplin addressing the entire planet. And he says, don't do this. Don't do this. You don't have to. These people only have their power because you allow them to have it. Yeah. You can put down your guns. You can walk away. You are not machines. You are men. You are not cattle. You are men. With you have hearts. You have minds. You don't have to follow these people. And he implores them. And I put that speech. Yeah, and no hyperbole, up there with, you know, Martin Luther King's speech and Abraham Lincoln's speech. Right? It is that good and that powerful, and he uses that platform to just completely try to encourage the world just to not do this thing, not to listen to these people. And God damn, if they would have listened, right? And we're still in that same place today.
Unfortunately.
We're still dealing with the same thing. That speech is still just as relevant today as it was in 1939, 1940, whenever it was made.
You're absolutely right about that. And you're right. And in fact, not only film historians, but regular historians will also put that speech alongside MLK and some of the other important 20th century speeches. And again, at personal risk. And truly, again, he didn't care. He knew, he saw what was wrong. And those themes are well, you know, obviously go beyond reality in terms of the fun story that you tell. And it truly is a fun story because, again, you've got Chaplin as himself kind of getting into skirmishes with Nazis and the American Bund, which were the group sympathetic to the Nazis here in the States. And it's a great use of, as I was telling you, your artist, Dexter Wee, I think does an incredible job of conveying Chaplin's sort of business in an boxing that I am and stuff. And it's so great because the way Chaplin choreographs this fight and just uses his smarts, but really is just like staying out of the way of punches while he's landing his own. And you get that same kind of action in this story. And I want to also acknowledge your co-stars that you've got for The Fuhrer versus the Tramp. And I'm going to show the cover again, and you can identify the other two Hollywood greats in this shot.
Yeah, so that's Errol Flynn and Hedy Lamarr. So in the story, the Nazis and Hitler are trying to sabotage him making the great dictator, and FDR is trying to encourage him to make it. So he has two of his secret agents kind of help Charlie to stay on path, make the movie, and help him punch Nazis in the face.
Absolutely, man. And I love that scene with Hedy Lamarr and FDR. It reminds me of that great Paul Levitt's Justice Society origin comic from the late 70s or early 80s, where FDR kind of implores the heroes to create the Justice Society. And I know it's great. And here's another great shot. These are all pinups, or they were covers that were used, I'm assuming, when they were coming out, issue by issue. But there's Hedy Lamarr. Reminds me in a great way of my buddy Steve Bryant's character, Athena Voltaire.
Yeah.
The Aviatrix. But there's Hedy Lamarr as an action hero, and Charlie right there with her.
Can you identify the homage on that issue? Let's see if you could get it. Did you get it?
Oh, the homage?
Yeah.
I'm thinking.
Everybody homages the first issue. This is the second issue.
Oh, so are you saying of this image or the previous image?
That image. It's from Action Comics #2. Everybody homages the first one.
Wow.
Which I freaking love that shot. It's just
my God.
Image.
I had no idea.
Except it's a dude saving a girl,
That's great. Yeah. No, of course you're right. Yeah, that's amazing.
Everybody watches the first one, but nobody watches the second one.
That's true. No, you're right about that, man. That's a very, very good point. And I love this conversation. I got to throw this up. My buddy Hillary Barta made this. This is much of a see missing word balloon episode about movies as it is about comics. So consider this a double shot, talking to Sean about the real events and then the heightened reality that he provides in The Fuhrer versus the Tramp. But tell me about getting Dexter Wee for this.
Okay, so Dexter and I have been working for over a decade together. John Judy is my co-writer on Fuhrer and the Tramp, and Dexter and John did a book together called Swerve. It's a pro wrestling noir, and John and I had originally worked with Dexter Wee on something else before that, and it never got picked up. And then John just completely powered through and did those 5 issues of Swerve, finished it, got it published by Arcana,
okay.
And then it was picked up by Fox 21 for a hot minute, So, he had some success by just finishing a thing. I kept making a single issue pitch and then putting together doing the art for a single issue with Dexter and then doing a pitch. And I did 6 of those, sent them around, and just I got rejected a few times, but mostly I heard nothing. Nothing at all. And just that is the worst feeling. I don't know if I'm on the slush pile. I don't know if it just hit the trash can. I don't know. Yeah. So then, I was getting older. I'm looking 40 in the eye and decided John just stuck with this one thing. I could have done 6 issues and done a whole series instead of 6 issues that get abandoned. So I decided just to make something for myself. Instead of trying to make something for the marketplace, make something I wanted to read. Something that I didn't know if anybody else wanted to read, and I didn't care. I wanted to read a story about Charlie Chaplin punching Hitler, I wanted to make something about all the things that I love. And make it for myself first and foremost. So, of course, I had Dexter on that, and I love working with Dexter. We have such a great give and take relationship going back and forth, and also he inspires me to be a better writer, and I hope I'm inspiring him to be a better artist. Giving him harder things to draw and things that he doesn't usually draw, yachts and boats and
right. Absolutely, man. No, yeah, well, I guess it's really just the 3 of them, obviously.
You're going to have Arrow. You got to swashbuckle, right?
No question. Well, and also, I was even telling you off the air, there were rumors that Flynn might have been a Nazi, and the reality was, no, he wasn't. And in fact, was a freedom fighter on his own right. He ran guns during the Spanish conflict, and I mean, it really had, and was from Tasmania,
Yeah.
and really was this mercenary.
He was.
Before going to Hollywood and becoming a leading man.
He
And
was wild.
I mean, hey man, I as a sequel, you almost ought to do an Errol Flynn in Havana story near the end of his life and everything. In fact, I just saw his second to last noir that he made that was shot in Cuba, and it's great. Man, I can't remember the name of it.
I need to pick it up.
The Big Bungle, literally. I mean, I know Bungle is in.
So some of those are so hard to find.
Absolutely, but it's so great because poor Flynn, as he got, I mean, the guy loved life and lived it to the fullest, and got in trouble a few times for living it to the fullest. Drank a lot, whored around a lot, and just with sadly underage women occasionally, things like that. But at the end, he really the effects of alcohol and his partying really showed, and it kind of makes this perfect noir where he's a croupier at a Cuban casino, and this is all pre-Castro, and finds himself implicated in a murder and has to prove his innocence. And it's so great because, I mean, I was always a massive Flynn fan, and really, I mean, this is a great shot. And of course, you think of Captain Blood and the Seahawk and so many of his great swashbuckling movies, but he really could do it all. And then even in this second to last movie, it's a really strong performance, and I kind of love that he's almost Captain America in this in this story.
Yeah, I'll have to hunt that one down and find it. I watched a bunch of Flynn's movies just to. I wanted the physicality to kind of register in the comics, so I was constantly watching the Chaplin movies over and over again, but then also watching things like Jackie Chan movies, and because Jackie Chan is obviously inspired by Chaplin and Buster Keaton, and
that's a great comparison to bring up, absolutely, because as I'm sure, forgive me for interrupting, but I was going to say, as you likely know, younger audiences may not want to see silent films, and I mean, just the fact that they're black and white can be a barrier sometimes to younger people. But bringing up Jackie Chan and his comedy physicality that he put into his action movies is a great way to look at Chaplin. Absolutely.
Yeah. It gave me because he has that same, more so with Chaplin, he has that same kind of aesthetic where he's always the underdog in his own fight, and then somehow he pulls it out. Somehow he pulls it off and he's able to win. So I kind of wanted that for Chaplin. Then you watch, like you said, you watch the Seahawk and of course Robin Hood and Captain Blood and you watch these movies with him, and I'm trying to capture that aesthetic. This just flamboyant, amazing swashbuckling, just this, this guy that, like you said, he died at 50, but he lived life like nobody else. He lived more life in 50 years than any of us could hope to in 200, He was a magnificent bastard.
Oh yeah. Have you read David Niven's books?
Oh no, I haven't.
David Niven wrote two tremendous Hollywood memory books. Bring on the Empty Horses, which is a quote from the director Michael Curtiz. And then the other is The Moon is a Balloon, I believe. But he was in the 30s Errol Flynn's roommate when they first came to America. Yeah. And so he really had a ringside seat for how crazy and fun-loving Flynn was. And I mean, truly, the two books, they're available on Amazon as Kindle reads. They are so worth reading if you really like old Hollywood stories. Because, I mean, and he doesn't tell them in a mean way, but he really does. I mean, God, Niven saw it all because he came to Hollywood in the 30s and literally started as an extra, as great of a leading man and actor as David Niven was. He started at the bottom and befriended Flynn very early. And just, I mean, and literally it's stories of, I mean, I'm paraphrasing because Niven said it much more eloquently. But it is about and then we're whoring it up, on Sunset Strip after a day shoot or whatever. And he's like, I couldn't hold a candle to, the way Errol would party and stuff. But it's fascinating. And I mean, and again, and also you've got Hedy Lamarr. Yeah. And I love this. I'm assuming this is kind of a cabaret tribute.
It is cabaret and also Out of the Past.
Sure, absolutely. And Hedy Lamarr is fascinating too because, first of all, I don't care what decade you compare her to for other beautiful Hollywood women. She is so unbelievably, hypnotically beautiful.
She is.
And she, too, rubbed against the Nazis in a personal way, sadly, because a lot of the men or a couple of the men that she had been involved with back in the day ended up being part of the Nazi machine.
Yeah, Mendel. She was married to Joseph Mendel, who was I think Czechoslovakian. He was a manufacturer of weapons, and was the Nazis and Hitler himself like partied at his place. This, and she was Jewish, know, and she was kind of hiding that at the time, and then snuck out. She left her husband. He was very controlling of her and wouldn't let her out. And was very domineering. It's really sad. But what she did was she took all of her jewelry. She was supposed to doll up for some party, and so he allowed her to get into the jewelry. She took all of the jewelry, put it all on, dressed up as like one of the maids, and snuck out of the house and took a train to London. And I met up with was it Louis B. Mayer? I think it was Louis B. Mayer. He met up with Louis B. Mayer there, and they smuggled her into Hollywood.
And of course, she made a very shocking film in the 30s called Ecstasy.
Which
was a nude. I mean, she's naked in the film, and
she has the first on-screen orgasm, so it's better than being a nude. She good for her. Come on. This is pre-Hays Code. While over there, it didn't have Hays Code, but still, she had the first on-screen orgasm.
Oh yeah. I don't know if you're aware, because I imagine you're a gentleman despite your knowledge. But Mr. Skin, the infamous website, I've interviewed Mr. Skin. He's actually a Chicago guy, Jim. Yeah, he's a tremendous guy. And he last year, was it last year or 2 years ago? Again, COVID makes you confused about the last couple of years. But he made this incredible documentary about the history of sex in cinema. And of course, Ecstasy is one of those touchstone films that he mentions and stuff. And it was great because he even went further back and really had other silent women that were known for burlesque or whatever that made silent nude films that were widely shown in the silent movie theaters and stuff of the day. And there are these incredible stories, and it was hilarious because I really wanted to talk about that stuff. And he's like, he knows he's marketing his film while he's talking to me. He's like, well, anyway, let's jump a few centuries ahead and get to Marilyn Monroe and even beyond, and the 60s and 70s. I'm like, no problem, Jim, it's cool. But it really is a great movie about the history of sex in cinema, and it's called Skin, ironically. And
I watched Eddie's movie. I only watched it twice, but but yeah, I watched Eddie's movie. Mendel actually bought up all the prints of it and destroyed all the prints, but a few of them got smuggled out of the country.
Clearly. So it lives on. Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
That's great. And again, I think she's great casting for an action heroine of the way you guys depict her and everything. I think it's very consistent with the real story. And I mean, it's just like, about 3 or 4 degrees above reality in terms of what if this stuff happened as well. So it's great.
Well, what I wanted a Luke, Leia, and Han vibe, so you got your naive Charlie, the guy that's barely keeping up with everything that's going on. And then your Han Solo with Errol, who's just awesome. But he's also a complete bastard. He's the prototype for Han, basically. And then Hetty is Leia. She's the one that's actually saving the boys. She's getting to the garbage chute flyboys. She's saving their asses. And that's Hetty, and that's how I want to play it up. That they're all showboating and stuff, or Chaplin's just doing his goofy antics and everything, and she's in the background, actually saving the day. She's actually taking care of it.
Well, and beyond being the femme, the beautiful woman and stuff. No, she's incredibly capable in this story, and absolutely helps get things done and keeps the focus of both the men, despite they're kind of wanting to jump into bed all the time. And I love, because that is a real trait of Chaplin. Certainly he had his share of women. And I got confused. At first I thought it was Hedy Lamarr, but it was Paulette Goddard, another contemporary of Hetty's and stuff that Charlie ended up marrying. And she was very young. but another great Hollywood beauty of the time. And no, I really do. I love this. And also, like I mentioned, the Captain America analogy, there's also a definite James Bond spy feel to this.
Yeah.
I mean, there are sequences I don't even want to mention them because I want people to read the story. That's why I wanted to stick to just the pinups as far as showing people the art. But no, there's great sequences that very much might remind people of a sequence in maybe Die Another Day, the Pierce Brosnan Bond film.
Yeah,
and just the way he's not only able to get out of his predicament, but also put a Bond kind of first class spin beyond surviving, landing in a lap of luxury rather than just getting away with, avoiding death and everything. So good stuff.
Yeah, that's what that James Bond is definitely a huge influence for it too. I also, have. I don't want to spoil it, but there's several characters that come up that are related to the James Bond, ethos.
Yep. No, it's a great opportunity to tell that kind of story. And again, like I said, I'm a sucker for. I really feel that there's a real opportunity to tell foreign intrigue stories. I guess that's the basic genre that you could call that period of globetrotting in the 30s. And Americans or Anglos finding themselves around the world in various action predicaments. But now you can really tell those stories with a modern sensibility, and the natives don't have to be a bunch of silent ugh kind of depictions, and you really can have the clash of culture to tell modern stories, to tell modern spin on a foreign intrigue story. In the case of the Nazis, I'm not suggesting that there needs to be any sort of better explanation. I mean, they're consistently evil and should be. Yeah. But they're unfortunately in a lot of ways they're the perfect villains. And like you said later, we're kind of dealing with that kind of mentality in modern day, which is just sad.
Well, it was weird to be writing this thing because I started writing in 2015, and I had to get ahead of it because Dexter he was busy at the time and he wasn't able to start till 2016. So it gave me a year to do a bunch of research and plot it out and write it. But just look at those dates, 2015, 2016, and I'm reading Rise and Fall of the Third Reich while we're watching Rise and Fall of
our country.
The same thing here. And I'm like, actually, I just read that chapter and we're doing the same damn thing here. What the hell is going on? Like, it was a fun romp whenever I started writing in 2015.
No, I understand, man. And it's unfortunate. But again, that's why we need reminders like this that we've overcome that kind of oppression before, and we will again. And it's. I mean, really, everybody. I don't want everyone to think that it is a downer story. It's a lot of fun, and it really is that thumb in the nose of authority that Chaplin was known for, but taking it to another level in terms of really making it a fun action. It's an action adventure comedy. It's romancing the stone.
Exactly, that's a good word for it. Romancing the Stone. The Indiana Jones movies, the Raiders was a huge influence on this.
Sure.
Just that kind of high action adventure. But still, I like to be informed by the reality, because I read all their autobiographies. I read, Errol Flynn's. Did you ever read his? My Wicked Ways?
No, I haven't.
Oh my God, you got to read it, John. Because he is unabashedly a bastard. He talks about it in very, very frank terms of how awful he is, but he's awful while being amazing.
Yeah.
He's a man of a different era.
100%. Absolutely, man. And that's a great way to contextually put it as well. This is not a guy that would be a hero in today's world.
He wasn't Me Too then.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
He's one of the original Me Too's.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was I know he at least had one statutory rape case against him.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just, now these are willing 16-year-olds that were very happy to jump into bed with Errol Flynn. But
number one, you got to look at Errol Flynn. Also, you got to look at the time period that's being done.
Yep.
He is the most handsome dude in the entire planet at this point. Girls were, I don't want to, it's so hard to talk about. But the reality of it was girls would actually go to Hollywood trying to lose their virginity to Errol Flynn. It was a real thing that was going on. Also, this is the Great Depression, and people were trying, the biggest thing that, like, to get out of that, like, poverty, sometimes mothers and it was mothers and fathers would, like, try to hook their daughter up with Errol Flynn, just hoping to get a better life, you know?
Yep.
And so, it's awful. It's horrible. But at the same time, it's 80 years ago. And I just realized that the level of privilege that I exist in and that I live at, to be able to see it as such, I could never imagine what it would be like to be going through anything that they went through in the Great Depression. You know, I talked to my great grandma and grandma about it growing up. I didn't get a transformer whenever I was 10, and that was my Great Depression, you know?
I understand.
I have no idea what it's like to be at that level of desperation.
No,
how can I judge anybody on all this stuff? I can't, you know. I can only do it from a position of privilege of, you know, not having that kind of desperation. But there was the movie In Like Flynn kind of deals with that. Did you see that one? It has Kevin Kline plays Errol Flynn.
No, I haven't seen the Kevin Kline one. Go on.
It's okay, but it's worth watching. That's what it really deals with. So I think Susan Sarandon is the mom trying to get her daughter to marry Errol Flynn.
Wow.
You know, she has her own, like, ideas of wanting to be successful and famous and stuff, and is living vicariously through her daughter, and is completely smitten by Flynn. But all of them are. And it's the last woman that he married, and, you know, was with him whenever he died. It's a wild movie, but, you know, it's good, it's decent, but, you know, it's pretty accurate. Whenever you read the book, it's pretty accurate. Because
there's a TV movie that Duncan Rainier made. I think that's how you say his name.
Yeah.
He was one of the TV Zorros. He was on one of my favorite shows, Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
He was the resistance leader of the Bajorans that for a while has a relationship with Kira. And he played Flynn, and it was an adaptation of My Wicked Ways. So I did see that. And that was like late 70s, early 80s.
A lot of those are just so hard to find. I don't even know that stuff.
And, you know, it might be on YouTube.
Okay.
I've really found a lot of TV movies from my youth on YouTube, and it's so God, there's a Houdini movie that is like, you know, I mean, it barely tells the truth, but Paul Michael Glaser, Starsky from Starsky and Hutch, plays Houdini. Sally Struthers, Gloria from All in the Family, plays Bess Houdini. Vivian Vance from I Love Lucy, Ethel, is Bess Houdini's best friend and the narrator of the movie. And in the movie, you know, they follow Houdini's basic life, and yes, the magician, and busting seances as he did, and exposing clairvoyant people for the reality that they were sham artists and stuff. And the movie, Houdini dies as he did, and Bill Bixby plays a medium that had tried to approach them when Houdini was still alive, and after Houdini dies, comes back to Bess and says, "I have a message from your dead husband." And it ends with this great seance, and it's very sentimental. But of all people, Bill Bixby is the medium, and Brad Meltzer is a massive Houdini fan, and even did an episode of his show Decoded about Houdini. And I'm like, dude, have you ever seen this movie? And he's only a couple years younger than me, and he's like, no. And I'm like, it's on YouTube. You've got to watch it. So I sent him the link. 2 or 3 days later, he's like, I just finished watching it. I'm still pounding the floor laughing at how ridiculously fun this movie was. And it really was. It's a great early 70s movie of the week on ABC and stuff. And yeah, it's crazy, but and especially the casting. But I found it entertaining then. I still find it entertaining. And I would almost say, if you like the storytelling in The Fuhrer and the Tramp, you might like this movie.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to check that out.
I'll try and find the link, and I'll email it to you.
That's cool.
So, but yeah, no, this is honestly, I really do. I love stories like this. You know, we were starting to talk off the air, and I'm like, let's save it for on the air regarding the likeness rights issues and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, how tough was that?
Actually, here's what happened. So I've been trying to, I've been working on making a comic for years, and there's always, anytime you're trying to do something creative, there's a million reasons to say no. And I realized that the only person I had asked permission from was myself. Now, obviously, I'm using Chaplin, but and so that was an issue right away. So, like, I paid a retainer to a lawyer in Burbank, or not retainer, just like an hourly consultation, like
okay,
a couple $100.
Sure.
And so they just gave me a couple $100 worth of advice, and then wanted me to do like a $6,000 retainer, which was not going to happen.
Sure. There goes the budget for the book and beyond.
Exactly. Sure. Exactly. So basically they had said, he's a public figure. A lot of Tramp stuff is in the public domain, and, the estate is in Switzerland. So, it would be very difficult for for anything to happen. I'm like, I'm making this book because I love Chaplin. I don't want to fight with his heirs. I'm not going to get an argument with his heirs about it. I'm doing it to honor him. And but it seemed like it was going to be pretty cool. There was several other Chaplin books that went on Kickstarter, and I talked to those creators, and nothing happened to them. That was fine.
Oh, so are there other Chaplin comic books?
Yeah, there are. There he appears in other comic books. There's a couple he appears in, and there was a couple that there's one, an Italian one, where he it's about like the making of the circus and stuff.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I haven't been able to read it because it's still in Italian. They haven't translated it, but the pictures are beautiful. So I had talked to a lot of these other creators, and they didn't really have a problem. So I did my Kickstarter, and it was really, really successful. And 2 days before the Kickstarter ended, I got a letter from their attorneys
from the Chaplin estate.
From the Chaplin estate, the Chaplin estate is called Bubbles Incorporated. They contacted me, and I'm right at the end of like 2 days for this Kickstarter to be over. And really, I just want to get the book in people's hands. Sure. I'm not making any money off of this at that point. Even I'm paying for the publishing and paying back, my friends and sisters I borrowed money from.
I understand. Yeah.
So, so I talked to Andy Schmidt, who was, he was consulting on the book and editing the book with me. I don't know have you ever talked to Andy?
Oh yeah. Oh no, Andy was just on talking about his Earth 3 Crime Syndicate Justice League story that he did for DC and everything. No, Andy's an old friend. Absolutely.
Yeah. So like I had been talking to Andy for years, and consulting with him even before Comics Experience, or maybe right when Comics Experience started.
Okay.
So anyway, so I talked to him, and he put me in contact with Travis at Source Point Press.
Yes, and Travis has been on too, by the way.
Travis is great too. Yeah. So they sent down their lawyer. He drove down like 2 hours to meet with me at a Starbucks the very next day, and talked to me for several hours about it. And what he pointed out was that Chaplin is a trademark. It's not about copyright, and that's where the term entertainment lawyer that didn't consider and didn't talk about, like, the public or the likeness of being a public figure and being dead, and also the Tramp having so many movies in the public domain. That's one thing. But whenever you trademark a character, now he's a corporate brand. That's like if I would have done the example he uses, like if I would have done a comic book about Ronald McDonald.
Sure.
I'm not getting away with that. So we talked. The thing went back and forth, and they right away quickly wrote a letter to them and talked to the Chaplin estate and explained the situation to them, and they allowed me to finish the Kickstarter. So this is right away, like 2 days before the thing ends. So then they started talking about, because then they wanted to print it and do the floppies. So they started talking and negotiating with them, and came to a deal with them. And they've been really, really awesome to work with. I have nothing bad to say about the Chaplin estate. They've been fantastic. They had some changes that they wanted made from what I had originally did, but they were fair changes. They were and made the story different, but in some ways better.
Okay.
So there were some things they didn't they didn't mind me playing loose and fast and loose with the facts, except for in a couple places.
Okay.
Yeah, so those places I had to fix, which required drawing some new pages or rewriting a bunch of word balloons and stuff, which was fine. Even taking it from there and then going to Source Point, then we did a color version of it. So I colored the entire issue, all the issues, and
so all this is your coloring?
Yeah. And actually, I drew the city on that one.
What's that?
I drew London in the background in that one. I did all the.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, Dexter did the figures, and I did. That's what I said about our collaboration. We work back and forth like that a lot. Where I do the colors on the artwork that he sends, and I'll do. I kind of do a little like Keith Giffen style, where you do a bunch of thumbnails and layouts and everything.
Sure.
Because like you said, a lot of these action sequences, they were very, very choreographed, and so I would send him like still frames or send him parts of the movie, and then also sketch it out and show like how this action sequence would take place, because I was trying to capture that action. Plus also, like I said, I'm making this first and foremost for me, and I freaking love like little mouse traps, little Rube Goldberg machines in comics. I love that. I love following it down through and seeing the cause and effect. So whenever you do that and when you write that, it's kind of hard to describe in words, so you have to like draw little sketches and stuff and send to them. So anyway, where were we at about the rights
and the trade
to it? So yeah, they were able to pull that off, and at that point, I'm I just want people to read the book. I'm still in the red on this book,
Oh man, well I hope this points people in your direction for it. Did the estate? Was it always purely business? Did they ever really like go, hey, by the way, fun story or whatever?
No, they never said that.
Of course not. It's corporate. You're dealing with corporations. Of course not.
I only talk.
We have no fun.
Yeah. Well, maybe they did. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. So the trade's coming out in June 28th. The trade drops. I'm hoping maybe they get to see it then, or they actually take a look at it then. We'll see. I would like nothing more than to, be able to take it to do a little con over in Europe and
yeah, no kidding. Seriously.
At the estate, they do that like Charlie's birthday every year. They do the
oh wow.
Yeah, at the estate they have like all these people dressed up like Chaplin. They have like a little Chaplin convention at Charlie Chaplin Estate in Switzerland.
Wow, and especially given, like you said, Chaplin's prime was literally 100 years ago.
Yeah.
That's amazing that they, because I don't know, I guess from a literary standpoint, I expected from Sherlock Holmes that even has a few decades, obviously, on Chaplin. But that is great to see, because really, man, and this has been a recurring refrain in the last month on Word Balloon, but I always say the 20th century is like the last, prior to the 90s, even in the 80s, there are gaps in history that, unless you talk to the right people, everything wasn't recorded film-wise with such intensity. And also the neglect that the silent film era,
like 75% of like the films filmed in the silent era are lost, are completely just lost, because people didn't appreciate it as an art form yet. That doesn't happen until, seeing movies as art doesn't happen until Cachet des Cinema, the French get a hold of it with Truffaut and Andre Bazin, whenever they write the magazine. Before that, and it's always the French that are turning things into high art.
That was the 50s, right?
Yeah, that's the 50s. So until the 50s, movies really aren't seen as high art, and especially the stuff, as they come out. Remember how they came out? They first came out as Nickelodeons, just tiny little movies that were just like one-reelers. Nobody thought that stuff was going to be anything. It was just a lark,
It was disposable entertainment of the moment. It's crazy. My family, and I only learned this in the last 10 years or so, but my grandmother on my father's side came to America on the backs of her brothers, and her brothers were silent film projectionists here in Chicago.
Oh, really? Oh, that's awesome.
And we're in these Nickelodeons and stuff at the turn of the century.
Yeah.
So yeah, that really, I've got my broadcast career, but yeah, it really, I always, when I talk to my friends who are in Hollywood and stuff, it's like, well, My favorite.
But being a projectionist back then meant like you were actually like cranking and operating the thing, and you had to do it at 16 frames or whatever.
Yep.
You could speed it up if you wanted to, make it go faster or slow it down. So they would have to know how fast to turn that crank. It was a whole skill.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. God. In fact, in Tom Hanks's HBO series From the Earth to the Moon.
Oh yeah,
a wonderful final episode where he plays a projectionist for the French filmmaker Georges Méliès, who made the film Trip to the Moon. Yeah, with the rocket. For people who don't know, you might have seen the rocket ship that hits the moon in the eye.
Yeah,
and it's literally somebody's face in like whipped cream or whatever, but that's the moon. So I mean, and it really, for being a turn of the century film as it was, it really is an incredible feat.
Oh yeah,
the way they made it, and the special effects and everything about it really is still impressive 120 years later.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you saw Hugo, right? You saw the Martin Scorsese movie. It's so freaking good. Like, I teach at Kent State, and I teach a history of film class, and so I showed a sequence of Martin Scorsese playing the projectionist and Méliès, and they recreate that whole thing. It's just so gorgeous, so beautiful.
Oh yeah. So, and Cinema Paradiso, the great Italian film.
I love that one. Well, the end of this is the end of Chaplin. That's one of the inspirations for it, man. That Cinema Paradiso, that movie, still like that end scene with all that supercut of the kisses. Oh, man, so freaking good.
Yeah,
so freaking good.
No, I agree. And it's funny, like even the artist that won the Best Picture a few years ago as a silent film. It's you really do forget the impact of silence.
Yeah.
And God, I'm so glad that Turner Classic Movies usually on Sunday nights will devote a few hours to silent the surviving silent films. And I've also been incredibly blessed with the notion that in the last year, through mutual friends, I've had Eddie Muller, the TCM Noir expert, on a few times.
Oh yeah,
that is always.
I heard that one. You did with Brubaker, right? That was awesome.
Well, yeah, but and I mean, that was Eddie wasn't on our Brubaker episode, but they certainly talked about Ed, because Ed being such. I mean, the great thing about Eddie Muller is I'm a comics fan, I'm a boxing fan, I'm an old movie fan.
Yeah,
Eddie creates the Noir Foundation, so that's his old movie hook, and certainly is one of these great film historians. His father was the top boxing reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle from the 50s through the early 80s. So that's Eddie's boxing connection. So he's a massive boxing fan. He's also a massive comic book fan.
Oh, wow.
And incorporated several issues of Noir Alley, his magazine that supports the Noir Foundation, about comics. And they've approached Brubaker and Tom King and artists as well to do images and talk about noir comics. So the great thing is when Eddie comes on, Eddie wants to talk boxing and comics with me, and he'll tolerate a few noir and old movie questions. But he's like, John, I do that all day, and it's just such a release to like come on with you and talk about boxing and comics. And I'm like, that's great, Eddie. I'm like, whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah.
And then he's amazing that way too. And again, thank God for Turner Classic Movies. I love that channel. And in fact, the either the festival was last week or it's this week, I forget which. But I'm so thrilled when they show young people gravitating to these old movies and stuff. And they're great stories. It's like, oh man, if I really hope black and white isn't a barrier for you to get into this movie, because you're literally missing the first 70 years of filmmaking if you're blowing off black and white.
And what's so interesting about it too is you're missing watching them figure this shit out. How do you make a movie? Movies are a special effect. All movies are a special effect. That's what Ebert said. It's like you're projecting 24 frames a second into people's eyeballs, and our persistence of vision tricks us into seeing motion where it's just a bunch of single images.
That's right.
So figuring out how to make that and watching like the history of film and watching, it's like, how do we cross cut? How can we go from, this area to this area and people don't, get confused? How much of the horse running with the fire truck do we need to watch? Do we have to watch every step of it, get to the fire before we cut? Will people be confused if they didn't take all the steps from the firehouse, and slowly figuring this out. And that's one of the things about Chaplin that I really adore I mean, he gets known as the Tramp, but the guy is a filmmaker to the level of Orson Welles. He is creating this shit. He is creating the language of cinema as much as, I would say, even more than D.W. Griffith. You know, he is creating this language. He is also doing it, composing his own music. He's operating the cameras. He also has his actors. They have to learn lines, because before that, I mean, it's silent. They don't have to know lines. They can just say, like, you know, there's that whole thing with Gene Kelly and Singing in the Rain, where he's like, can't you just say what I always say? I love you, I love you, I love you. Because that's what you just say, and it doesn't matter. Chaplin made them learn their lines because he knew saying the words would get a different performance. You know, he's the original Stanley Kubrick, going through and having multiple takes to get the take right. But that's the whole thing with that silent era, and going all the way up through the 30s and 40s. You're seeing them create the language of cinema.
That's right.
And that's what's so much fun, is like they were just figuring this shit out. Does this shit work? Does this work? Can we do it this way? Can we do it that way? What, you know, what's going to work? What our audience is going to respond to? What's cool, you know?
Have you seen that documentary? I don't know if it was ever made into a DVD, but I know it was on PBS in the 90s, and where they had found a bunch of rushes of Chaplin films of unused takes, and literally they keep shooting, and you know, an actor might botch a scene, but you see, I mean, obviously there's no sound, but you see Chaplin break character, laugh a little bit, like, all right, no, we got to do it again, you got to do this. And it's so great to watch. Oh yeah, I want to say James Mason was the narrator of it, so maybe it was the late 80s or whatever that it was made. But it's so fascinating, that, and thank God the existing footage of Buster Keaton also explaining how he made movies and created gags. And one thing that I love about it, and it really was only a few years after Keaton's prime, but he was so frustrated by the Marx Brothers when he would make films with them, because he was sadly, you know, Keaton had, as you I'm sure well know, post-silent films, and before he was rediscovered in the 50s, Keaton really had a very dark 10 or 15 years, if not 20 years, where he had to take where he was making, say, $3,000 a week for the studio, was making only $300 a week as a gag man for other MGM films. And so he was working on the Marx Brother films, and he's like, these guys, just to get them on set was its own like wrestling match. And he goes, just their lack of giving a shit about making a movie. He's like, my God, in my prime, he goes, all of us were so heavily involved, and we ate, dreamt, and, you know, slept, and all we thought about was making these movies and making these gags and how to make them and stuff. And there are, God, in fact, in this one Keaton documentary that I do believe is on YouTube that was made in the 80s, and I do again believe that maybe James Mason was the narrator, but there was like a great, they didn't know how to make a gag for a Red Skelton 1940s movie where a dog that could have attacked him is on the other, in the film, is on the other side of a door. And they're like, we need something, we need a joke here or whatever. And Keaton just kind of stepped back and thought about it. And he's like, have Red take the hinges off the door, so now it's just a flat piece of wood, and have him slowly turn around so that they switch places with the door as a shield, and then have him lean the door back and stuff, and that's how he gets out of the thing. And it's this great visual gag. And of course, Buster Keaton's the guy who came up with it.
Yeah, exactly. The awesome thing about that too is, you know, there was supposedly this rivalry between Chaplin and Buster Keaton through the 20s, but then it's Chaplin is the one that brings him back. You know, Chaplin,
Limelight,
one of the ones hiring him to help out, and was giving him that. It was not giving him that career, but you know, was there supporting him and helping him, and actually brings it back. Was it what was the movie in the 50s they made with
Limelight?
Limelight. Yeah.
There's that great scene. They're both vaudevillian kind of comedians and stuff. And they're both putting their makeup on and having a little moment between them. No, you're right about that. And again, well, you know, Hollywood bullshit and stuff. Yeah. Are you a fan of Katrina Longworth's podcast?
I love her podcast.
You know, I haven't listened to the new episode yet. I'm excited that it's a new season, and a lot of times I will almost save them to savor it and make it last longer than the actual release time. And did you listen to Ben Mankiewicz and Bogdanovich?
Yeah, that was so good. That was great. And That was a great one. Katrina's are always good. And then what's the Secret Lives or the Secret History of Hollywood?
That's right, Secret History of Hollywood.
The Bullets and Blood one with the one talking about Louis B. Mayer and what
The Fixer?
Yeah. So good.
Eddie Mannix.
Yes, Eddie Mannix. That was so good. And then there's the old one they did about Hitchcock that was fantastic. He did that Hitchcock one that's really good.
Oh, Secret History of Hollywood did a Hitchcock one? Oh, I'm going to have to check that out. I don't think I heard that one. That'll be great.
Yeah, you should check that one out. I think you have to buy into his Patreon to get it. It's well worth it. It's like 10 hours long or something, but it's great.
Hey, I ask people to support my Patreon, and I'd be happy to if it's good. If it's good content, you know that.
Yeah, since we're talking about podcasts, John, the reason I'm here is because of Word Balloon. Seriously. So like, I went to Kent State. I went as I wanted to make comics. So I went in art school, and of course the professor's like, what is this? This is comics. Blah, it's not serious. So then I go into illustration, and the illustration teachers are like, comics. They're still thumbing their nose up at comics, and I end up getting into graphic design and working as a graphic designer. I'm working in graphic design studios and stuff. And you're sitting there making these brochures and flyers and catalogs and shit. But I'm listening to Word Balloon in the early 2000s. Listening to always listening to Bendis tapes or listening to Matt Fraction doing his Orson Welles impersonation.
That's right, drunk Orson Welles. That's right. The French.
But yeah, avidly listening to Word Balloon all the way through. You're one of the original podcasts that I ever listened to. Even before I listened to Smodcast, I was listening to you. And,
that's nice. I appreciate you saying that, because honestly, I started in 2000. Well, you might know, Monday's going to be my 16th anniversary.
Oh, congratulations, man.
And thank you, man. And honestly, I do, and then no disrespect to any of the great big name podcasters, but I do love when people puff up their chests like, oh, I've been doing this since 2010. I'm like, I was having my 5th anniversary in 2010. That's great.
I know. I was one of those listeners, because that's how I got through the day. It was either that or just like listening to Radiohead on repeat or just listening to,
Well, you might know. I mean, thankfully, it's only been in the last couple of years that the academic side of art has really accepted comics. In fact, I don't think I'm speaking out of school, no pun intended, but Brian Bendis he was teaching a class at one Oregon college. Mm-hmm. They had a change in English department, heads of the department, and the guy's like, what's this comic book bullshit? And they're like, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. And it's like, okay, fine. So Brian moved his class to Portland State that absolutely welcomed him. And now he co-teaches the class with Dave Walker. And, it's like, and also I love that Diana Schutz really transitioned out of day-to-day comic publishing and editorial to her academic position. And I forget which school. It might be the same school, in fact, because I know she's up in Portland or in Oregon, at least because of Dark Horse. But, she teaches as well. And yeah, I mean, you got SCAD, and you've got, of course, the Kubert School and other handfuls of the Pratt Institute and things like that do teach comics seriously. But, you can't knock success. And when, the Marvel movies are the obvious champions of the last 20 years of movie making, and their source material is comics, it's like, okay, now talk to me about how bullshit comics are.
For me, what my argument was always is like, this is the oldest art form. I mean, the idea of making comics goes all the way back to the caves of Lascaux in France. It's the hieroglyphics are comics. Just read your Scott McCloud. This is comics. Comics goes all back there.
Yes. Thankfully, and I'm glad you mentioned Scott, because a few years before I started Word Balloon, the University of Chicago, which is obviously like a very top intellectual, very highbrow school, and they had a humanities weekend in the early, like 2001 or 2002, on the importance of comics. And it was so great because Scott was there, and Art Spiegelman was there, and Neil Gaiman interviewed the Spirit, Will Eisner. Yeah, and I got to really meet all of them in this great academic, taking it seriously forum. And it was so great because they did these great onstage presentations in some of the big lecture halls, and then afterwards they just hang out in the lobby, and you could just walk up and talk to them. And a couple of the stores were smart and were selling comics in the lobby and stuff. And I mean, it was great because you could just tell the level of respect that was in the room. And I always quote the Rocky Balboa film in the closing rounds when he's fighting the younger champion, and his son is working his corner, and he's like, "Hey, nobody's laughing anymore. Finish this. Let's go. You can do this." And it's true. I mean, nobody's laughing anymore at comic books. Yeah. God, today, Jupiter's Legacy dropped, the Netflix show that Mark Miller. I haven't either, man. I'm looking forward to watching. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to. Again, I like to savor these things.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to watch the whole goddamn thing in one swoop. But I love that. I'm so happy for Mark. I'm so happy for Kirkman with the success of Walking Dead and now Invincible. Yeah, I mean, and Bendis has got stuff in development at HBO Max for Cover and for oh god, I'm blanking on the other ones that he has in there. Damn it, it's the thing that he made with Dave Walker too. I can't think of its name right now. But several.
The tattoo one, right?
Oh no, it's not the tattoo one, but that's a great series. No, it's about the girl that now it's a new hero in the DC universe, a young black woman, and I can't remember her name right now. Shame on me, everybody. I apologize. I'll know it in the post when I do the wrap up and pre-record the wrap up for the audio version of this. But hey, Sean, great job, man. Honestly, so it comes out in June.
Yeah, June 28th. It's right now in previews. You can order it. It's the order code's APR 211923. I don't know if you've ever. It took me a while, and not until I had a book in previews did I understand how the order code works. The APR means April, so it's in the April issue. The 21 means 2001 or 2021, and then I just remember 1923. So, but yeah,
I believe the year of oh god, what was it called? He had Chaplin made a drama.
Yeah,
Woman in Paris.
Yeah. His one and only. Well, not only drama. He did make. He made a couple later on, but
Limelight's
a drama. Yeah.
But he wasn't. If he's in Woman in Paris, it's just a walk on.
Yeah,
he's not one of the main stars. It really is him.
Yeah, it didn't do very well.
Yeah, I'll admit I've never seen it. I think I have seen most of.
You can't find it. Some of this.
Oh wow! One of the lost films. Interesting.
Yeah, well, it may not be lost. It may just not be for distribution. That's the thing. Is like a lot of this stuff. It just didn't ever. It's not on streaming. It's not. It's not a lot of stuff. Maybe it's definitely not on Blu-ray, but DVD. I mean, we got Criterion's putting out stuff. Maybe they'll put it out eventually.
There was a book that came out. I'm trying to do the math in my head now. About 5 or 7 years ago, maybe 2014, 2015, mm-hmm. And when we still had outdoor live events, the Chicago Tribune always did their book convention every summer in June. And I know there is a book out there called Chaplin in Chicago, and it focuses, I want to say Mutual was the name of the silent film company where Chaplin spent a couple years here in Chicago before going to Hollywood.
Yeah, you're right. I'm pretty sure it was Mutual. That was an interesting time because, Hollywood wasn't even Hollywood then. It was still just orange groves.
That's right. Well, you're right. And I mean, obviously in the States, film started in the East Coast. They came to Chicago and started making films. And they were just, because so much of the shooting was done outdoors, they were looking for better climate.
Yeah.
That's how they migrated to Hollywood.
They're trying to get away from the Edison patents.
Right. Yes.
Edison had on it, which is also very hypocritical because Edison was also screening Méliès's films and never paying Méliès for screening, A Trip to the Moon and so whatever.
And for all the brilliant inventions and innovations that Edison came up with, and as a grade school kid, Edison was absolutely one of my heroes until I got older.
Yeah.
And read about the shit with Tesla, the shit with the movie combines and him demanding money. And it's like, oh, Edison really was kind of a dick.
Yeah. Frying the elephant. Jesus Christ.
Yes. Oh my God. I've seen that footage. Holy shit. That's the electricity DC versus direct current versus alternate current, No, it's unfortunately Edison was not the greatest guy in the world. No.
But then again, it's like it's the same thing whenever I read about history and I look back. That's 125 years ago and stuff. I mean, like I don't.
It's a different world.
It makes me not. The more I come, it's like we can't really understand what it was like to be back then. We can't really understand. What that was like. I mean, that was man. Women couldn't even vote at that time.
That's
I mean,
right. It's only been 100 years. You're absolutely right. Yep.
But also, what value is there in judging people from another century? I don't know that there's.
Well, sadly, that's kind of. Forget about another century. They're calling out people that made a mistake or were young and foolish.
Yeah.
10 years ago, 20 years ago. When they come out against Hollywood people, and it's like, in 1981 you were kind of an asshole, and it's like, and nothing like rape or any serious physical crime.
Exactly.
It's just you were a jerk to work for, and it's like, I'm sure he was. I'm sure these people were. It is possible that maybe they've grown a little bit since then. It's also possible they might still be dicks. I honestly don't know, but it really does kind of like starch my shorts when it's like, come on, man. I mean,
I talk about the same one because Jesus Christ, that guy can make some goddamn great comics. Some of my favorite comics. And then I know, like, I don't know how to explain it. There's never anything like super concrete. It's like, all right, you had a difference of opinion. I don't know.
Again, people
bosses before, I've already
are complex. I mean, that's the thing. We are in a black and white society currently, and people are more complex than that.
Exactly.
And also,
100%.
And again, I mean, I think because we're a little older, we understand that I think a bit better than the generations under us.
Oh, and we probably didn't when we were 22. You're still in that mentality where you're judgmental of older people and stuff, and you don't realize the nuances of actually living life.
Right, and then also the change comes, but sometimes it takes baby steps.
Yeah, and then sometimes it takes huge steps, and you can't get caught up yet.
Absolutely, man.
And I don't know, it's very difficult. I mean, I would hate to be a kid now coming up, and it's so. And I think what this is we're reacting to the last 4 years, overreacting to compensate for that kind of shit. So it's obvious. So hopefully. It's Hegel's dialectic. You take 2 steps forward and then 1 step back. 2 steps forward. You're always moving forward and you're overcompensating, but then you got to come back and get back more toward that middle, but you're still moving forward. And I think we're in that. We're conversely in the step back and the 2 steps forward at the same time.
You're right.
Pulling our society apart.
No, you're 100% right. And Gail Simone and I last time we talked. And I'm so glad because I really respect her.
Yeah,
and we were talking about comics and unfortunately the bad abusers of their positions in comics. And as I told Gail, I'm like, Gail, if we apply this to Hollywood, you pretty much have to wipe out about 100 years of bad behavior, and that really does unravel the entire tapestry of Hollywood. And I say that not to forgive the bad actors that were so abusive and stuff.
I know. I'm totally with you. I mean, like, if you do that, well, Michelangelo, that dude, he was an asshole. Michelangelo was definitely an asshole. There's no way that he wasn't. Everything you read about him, that dude was an asshole. Should we give up the Sistine Chapel ceiling? I think that's one of the things that we're wrestling with as a society. The reason we create art, to make great art, is to get out of this like corporal being and this muddy, black grayness of being a person, and create something and aspire to something that's much bigger than us. That we are all flawed. Every fucking one of us is super flawed. Yep. Nobody is perfect, but you can create an art that is perfect, and that's going to live forever and live beyond you. And I think we do it a disservice by trying to like wipe out the art because a person was doing normal human bullshit people stuff, Yep. And we're wiping out some that actually tried to achieve something that's like greater than just being a flesh and blood person,
I'm totally with you, man. No, absolutely. Well, we'll end on a positive note and again, point people to The Fuhrer and the Tramp. This is the cover for the graphic novel. Again, it comes out in June, and it's in the current. It's in the April previews.
Yeah.
So, is there a final cutoff for orders or anything? Or
no, there isn't.
Okay, good.
And I just saw that it's in Simon & Schuster now, so libraries can order it.
Hey, that's fantastic. Good, man. That's great.
Oh, that was what I was really pulling for. I want that because I really want to campaign librarians.
I don't blame you, man. No, again,
I rose up through reading books in libraries. I want my book in a library.
Oh, I hear you, man. No, and again, as I kind of go through some of these great images from your collaborator Dexter Wee, well done, man. Honestly, Sean, I really enjoyed the story.
Thanks,
and
John.
It's really scratches a lot of my familiar itches, and yeah, I can't recommend it enough. So congratulations on that, and no, really fun talking to you. When you've got your next project ready, let me know, and we'll do another talk.
Oh, that'd be excellent. Thank you so much, John.
My pleasure, man. Everybody, thanks a lot for watching. Sunday night, I'm welcoming back Nikki Wheeler-Nicholson. We're kind of sticking with history, 20th century history, and she's got a great free panel that she's going to do next weekend for Comic Complex. And right now it escapes me, but it's one of the lost women creators of the 1940s, and she's putting focus on that. And it's going to be her and Colleen Doran and Trina Robbins among the panelists that are talking. But I love talking to Nikki Wheeler-Nicholson, whose great-grandfather was Malcolm Wheeler-Nicholson, the founder of National Comics, what became DC Comics, and the original guy who had the pre-Superman action-adventure ideas in original comics, and really one of the founding fathers of the comics medium. And she's been a great keeper of her family's history. So I'm really excited to talk to her about this panel she's going to do. It's free. All you have to do is register for it next weekend. And we'll have more details on that when I talk to Nikki. That's going to be Sunday night at 9 Eastern, 8 Central. And that's going to be a fun conversation. Monday, I'm talking to Tom King for my 16th anniversary. We'll have a lot of fun. He's going to interview me. Oh, I asked my patrons, I'm like, what do you want me to do? Do you want a big guest? Whatever. They're like, we want someone to interview you. And I'm like, all right, great. So I'm happy to do that. That'll be a lot of fun. And next week's going to be a real John McCrae's coming back. Love talking to Johnny. And we'll talk about his new Kickstarter campaign that he's got going on. And then next Friday, I am talking to, I'm blanking, Ed Pisker from Pittsburgh, who does cartoon kayfabe, or cartoonist kayfabe with Jim Rugg. Great YouTube show. And he's got a new horror anthology that starts next month called Red Room. And so we'll be talking about that and also about cartoonist kayfabe. Some of the highlights for next week's Word Balloon Live. But Sean, thank you again for talking tonight. Everybody stay safe.